He's Dan Bickley. I'm Mike Jarecki. A big debate at the Super Bowl this week. Randy Moss called himself the greatest wide receiver in the history of the NFL. Now, a lot of people rolled their eyes about it. When you think about it, you can make a case for Randy Moss. Maybe not a great case, but you can make a case for him.
Well, I think in his prime, Dan, and we pointed this out on the show yesterday, there wasn't anybody better on the deep ball, okay? You look at his body of work over the period of his career. Obviously, he had a great start in Minnesota. You look at his time in New England, they got a chance to play for the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, they lost that game. But you go back to Oakland, where he had 2 disappointing years. In my opinion, he rolled over. He quit on his teammates, and that's the reason why the Raiders got rid of him. However, you look at his numbers, and he has to be in the top 3. There's only 21 wide receivers in the modern-day Hall of Fame, and there's guys still trying to get in this year, the Chris Carters of the world and Tim Browns. And so when you look at Randy Moss's body of work, clearly he's behind Jerry Rice when it comes to receiving yards and touchdowns.
But the difference is the ratio of touchdowns by Randy Moss far exceeds that of Jerry Rice or any other receiver who's ever played, meaning of his receptions, he was more likely to burn you deep than anybody else in NFL history. In fact, that is Randy Moss's claim to fame. He is, without a doubt in my mind, the greatest deep threat among wide receivers in NFL history. I'm not sure, as great as Jerry Rice was, and I do agree with you that Jerry Rice is the greatest of all time still, but I don't think Jerry Rice inspired fear in a defensive coordinator the way that Randy Moss did.
Well, I think they both did, man, and we talked about this, whether it was Steve Young or Joe Montana, and that's the word now. Randy Moss is saying, hey, if I would have had these 2 Hall of Famers, I would have had bigger numbers. He brings up a good point. But when you look at just Jerry Rice in that West Coast offense, they would throw a 9-10 yard dig route to him, and next thing you know is yards after catch. You're right about the deep ball. Another guy that comes to mind is James Lofton.
Yeah.
Lofton was really good on the deep ball. But when you look at what Jerry Rice accomplished, okay, and yeah, he had 2 great quarterbacks in Steve Young and Joe Montana, where maybe Moss didn't have that. I still think yards after catch, you had to know, as a defensive coordinator, you had to know where Jerry Rice lined up every single time, because you'd want to double him, and that opened things up for guys like J.J. Stokes and John Taylor and even T.O. at certain points. But overall, I put Randy Moss in the top 3.
Yeah. Now, Randy Moss, the problem with Randy Moss is not a lot of people are going to buy his argument because he wasn't a really good guy during his prime as a player. I remember when he was a rookie, when the Cardinals played the Vikings in the playoffs, they had the open locker room. It was Dennis Green's Vikings. And I went up to Randy Moss and I said, hey, Randy, you got a minute? He looks at me and goes, no. And it's a rookie, right? And team in a playoff game. Where is the cooperation? Where is just the sense of, okay, you know what? I'm not all that. Randy Moss from the very beginning had personality issues, and Dennis Green enabled it. Never reined him in as his first head coach. Dennis Green probably had the power to maybe break Randy Moss a little bit and never did.
I'll say this about Denny Green, though. He wasn't afraid to draft. A lot of people thought he was going to the Cowboys. He slipped in the draft, okay? And yeah, he was kind of a loose cannon when he first came into the league. I mean, think about it. He had a chance to get into Florida State, couldn't get in. Couldn't get into Notre Dame. He ended up at Marshall, okay? That's where his high school to college career extended. And then over the years, he became kind of just abrasive with the media. And then when Oakland, he rolled over. I will say this, though. I've been very impressed with Randy Moss this week. I think he's been open-minded. I think he's talked about his entire career. And when you listen to him talk X's and O's, I think you'll be surprised.
Yeah.
He's a smart guy when it comes to football, and he's been low-key all year. I think he plays 27 snaps a game. He'd like to extend his career somewhere next year, whether it's in San Francisco or not. But I'm telling you, when you listen to Randy Moss, I think he's well-educated on the football IQ. And Belichick said he was one of the funnest guys to ever coach because he respected the fact he knew football.
Well, let's bring him to Arizona. Larry Fitzgerald loves the guy. We could pair him opposite of Fitz. Not a good idea.
Well, I mean, if he's going to be your 3rd or 4th receiver, I know you're kind of being tongue-in-cheek here, 3rd or 4th receiver, he's not going to play a lot. If you're the Jets, why wouldn't you sign Randy Moss? I know it's a circus up there, and maybe he doesn't need to be in that environment with the media, but I've been very impressed with Randy Moss this week, just from the standpoint that he's finally opening up. Because don't forget, this guy didn't play last year. He was almost on semi-retirement. And he bought into the Jim Harbaugh team concept, and so I've been impressed the way he's handled himself this year.
He's Mike Jarecki. I'm Dan Bickley. Listen to us every day, 2 to 6 on Extra Sports 92.